It's wonderful to see everybody here tonight for tonight's discussion, For Color Inspiration, a conversation about comics and the arts with Aidan Urquhart, Maureen Riley, and James Kirkpatrick. My thanks too to the organizers of the Ting Festival, especially Sandra DeSalvo and Deanna Tamblin for inviting the public humanities and myself to come and take part in the festival. My name is Josh Lambier. I'm the director of the Public Humanities at Western, as well as the artistic director of the Words Literary Festival, which is here in London, Ontario. So I'm going to start us off with a little context for tonight, and beginning with our region as a crucible for artistic creativity. So Southwestern Ontario, or SOWESTO, to invoke the name that Greg Curnow and writer James Rainey have given to the region, has a long history of nurturing its fair share of Canada's brightest writers, such as Robertson Davies, John Kenneth Galbraith, Paul Haggis, and of course the Nobel Prize-winning author Alice Munro. In recent years, too, we have been very fortunate to see the emergence of new festivals and events that celebrate these achievements with interactive events that bring our artists together with the community to celebrate and reimagine our shared cultural life. Each of these events calls attentions to the importance of the arts in our community. The Ting Festival has brought to our attention another creative legacy of SOWESTO. And I say another because I come from the literary background, but there's a new legacy that we're celebrating here in London, and that is the incredible concentration of talent in the comic and graphic arts. At the same time that the project of London regionalism was unfolding in the activities of Curnow and Jack Chambers, Murray Favreau, Art Pratt and Ron Martin, Patterson Ewan, the Rabinowitz twins, Tony Urquhart, James Rainey, Kim and Michael Ondaatje, to name many, many more, Merle Tingley was drawing cartoons featuring his recurring character, Loopworm, that sartorial worm sporting a top hat. As the Guelph-based cartoonist Seth remarked in his induction speech for Ting into the Giants of the North Hall of Fame, and this is to quote Seth, Ting was a regionalist, an artist whose work reflected a local environment instead of that of the national or international one. Now sure, Seth continues, a lot of Ting's work was about NATO or Lyndon Johnson or Trudeau or whatever was going on in the big wide world, but it was also very much involved with the day-to-day of London, Ontario. And yet, if you consult the scholarly essays, as I was in preparation for tonight, on the London regionalist movement in the 60s and 70s in London, you won't find many mentions of Ting, if any at all, in the same conversation as the artists and writers I just mentioned. But make no mistake, the influence of Ting, as the festival bears witness to, is still felt as much for the comics community as the regionalist painters do for the visual arts world in London and beyond. Certainly we can see Ting's influence on Seth, beginning with a classroom visit to his Strathroy public school to draw to inspire the children. But we can see the influence of a successful Southwestern Ontario cartoonist for a new generation of artists like Josh Lambier and his Essex County trilogy, which, as the title suggests, explores a unique and regional experience of SOWESTO. We could also look to the work of London's and Ting's Deanna Tamblin, who has taken up questions of regional intrigue, such as the story of Frederick Banting. But what relationship is there between comics, literature, and the visual arts in SOWESTO today? Whether or not we draw a direct line of influence to these earlier London movements. How are artists in our community redefining the boundaries and liminal spaces between these artistic forms, and how are these forms being reimagined by our creative individuals? How does the comics world engage with the arts world? Today, we are lucky to have 3 London artists whose work interrogates and touches on, however directly or indirectly, as we'll see, on these very provocative questions. I'll keep my biographical information short and introductions. We're here to listen to our individuals, but I want to give some broad strokes by way of background and introduction. So we have Aidan Urquhart on the end of our dais. Born and raised in London, Ontario, Aidan attended Western and Fanshawe in studio and art theory. As an avid observer of various forms of media and digital culture, Aidan has taken acute interest in the information overload that bombards us today. His approach is to, and this is a slight reworking of something he has said, to cannibalize this information and distill it through works in collage, drawing, photography, mixed media painting, installation, mail art, fax art projects, sticker projects, and more. Though many of his posters or his projects take place beyond the walls of the traditional gallery, his work can also be found in numerous public and private collections, including the Winnipeg Art Gallery, the National Archives Ottawa, the Canada Council Art Bank, Macintosh Gallery, St. Thomas Elgin Art Centre, and of course, Museum London. James Kirkpatrick, in the middle. James studied art in London's prestigious arts-focused Beale Secondary School before receiving his BFA at Halifax's NASCAD. He works in a variety of media, including drawing, painting, sculpture, comics and zines, mask making, and experimental sound improvisation. Londoners will have had the chance to see James's work recently as part of the group show LO Today at Museum London, Not Bad for London at Michael Gibson, Sculpting Sound at the Judith and Norman Alex Art Gallery in Sarnia, and his Macintosh Gallery show, Secret Base by the Lake. Under the name Thesis Sahib, James is also a musician and avant-garde hip-hop artist who combines vocals with electronic noises produced on homemade instruments that are designed from repurposed video games, noise machines, and children's toys. And Maureen Riley, a graduate of Western University in English, as we were talking about at the beginning tonight. Maureen has been a full-time artist in London for the past 35 years. Her work reflects a vibrant palette with positive women-based images that include mystical, the mysterious, and the empowering, and the earthbound. Maureen's work is in dozens of private collections, and her images have been used by many organizations as well as Western University. Maureen is currently engaged in creating Kite Dream, a graphic memoir which includes, along with her stories, images from the past 3 decades. Cocktail Kids, a black and white cartoon, emerged out of Kite Dream and has taken on a life of its own. The kids have a website and will appear later this year in A is for Albatross, an alphabet for murder and mayhem with the Cocktail Kids. Please join me in welcoming our 3 artists. So given the context of our conversation, the Ting Comic and Graphic Arts Festival here at the Arts Project, I want to start off with something maybe open-ended and just to hear where you had your entry point for comics and the graphic arts. Was it something that was influential to all of you right from the beginning? Maybe we could start with Maureen.
Sure. I've always loved graphic novels, but I never conceived of doing one myself. But I've been painting for 35 years, so as I was edging towards 65, I had a story I wanted to tell that I couldn't tell in a painting, but I thought I could tell in a graphic novel using my skills as a painter. So a painting that's not a painting, giving me the ability to tell this story and also to insert some of the work I've done over the past decades. And the Cocktail Kids are a cartoon within that, and then they kind of busted out on their own. And so, yeah, who knows where that will go. But that is the path of them.
Wonderful. Thank you. James.
I don't know. I've been reading comics. Like, I remember I got my first comics when I was really sick, and my dad bought them for me when I was like really, really young. And he bought me some sci-fi and like some weird stuff. There was like Tales of Monsters in Another Planet and Captain Canuck.
Oh, yeah.
So I remember reading those. I still have those, actually.
Wow.
And then I was really into G.I. Joe when I was a kid, and like I really loved the sci-fi element of the cartoon, but the comic book had like kind of this weird like underground like thing that sort of fit in with like stories of like Illuminati stuff and different things like that, like on the subconscious level, on the sub-written level, you know, like Cobra Commander is actually the good guy who like is trying to save America from G.I. Joe, really, you know what I mean? That's the interesting thing about the whole story. And So I mean, and that stuff has gone like, so interested in that kind of idea of it, and then even getting into different avant-garde music and different sound stuff, and finding that a lot of the people who make music of the same sort of thing that I'm into make comics too.
Oh yeah.
And I would have often in the earlier days of making work, sometimes doing stuff outside, sometimes doing things inside, paintings and on things outside or whatever. I'd always write like a narrative that would go along with the figure or the shape or the object that I would make that would sort of give it an additional purpose, or like another, sometimes it would be like a poem almost or something, but it would go with an image.
Yeah.
So I was doing that for a long time. And of course, when I was a kid, I made lots of my own comics, you know, like Doctor Who and Ninja Turtle stuff all the time. Sometimes combinations of them, like stuff that just doesn't make any sense. And I like that idea of like sort of taking pop comics or pop ideas, but then like mixing them in.
Absolutely.
You know, and I'd always like sand off the face of my G.I. Joe characters and like draw new faces on them and stuff like that. Like my friends would always be like, "You're always wrecking your toys." Yeah, kind of a combo with that thing.
Yeah.
And then I make rap music, so I'm writing all the time. So I have this thing where often I wake up in the middle of the night or in the morning, or like I'm thinking of something before bed, and I write it down.
Yeah.
And it's like an idea for a song, but sometimes they get turned into comics. And I've been making, and I kind of realized I would make these drawings, and I started making a bunch of them, and around like with a lot of narrative with them, like more writing. And then I started going to TCAF Festival and other comic festivals like Expozine and stuff like that, and seeing, and I was like, I'm basically making comics. Why don't I just photocopy these now? And so around 2008, 2009, I started putting them together and stapling, you know, like making like a story, you know, and the stories were kind of dumb. It didn't make sense. And I'm still making comics that are dumb and don't make sense. And this was, thanks for inviting me into Ting this year, because it gave me an excuse to make these other half done, because I draw them on buses and when I'm taking a plane or whatever like that, or different things like that. So it's just a good way to throw them together. So, you know, there's stuff I was working on since 2004 that I got to finish, 2014 that I got to like finish like now and stuff.
And I read somewhere that you actually have cartoons on the background to inspire you, that you go back and watch and watch and watch.
Yeah, when I'm like having a lot, because like I have hard times making paintings and stuff, and like it's what I do partially as like it's what I love to do, but also it's like a thing that I do. I have exhibitions and stuff, so it's like sometimes just to get me all stoked to work, I'll like be like, all right, Saturday morning cartoons, you know, put on like, now on YouTube you can find everything.
Yeah, that's true.
Here's the trial of Cobra Commander, and I'll put it on, I'll be like, this is awesome, and I'll just start painting, and you know, and so yeah, it's a big inspiration, is like, you know, that. And I'm always reading comics and finding old ones again and rereading. I mean, a lot of British sci-fi too, like 2000 AD was a good comic back in the day, and those weird stories from that and stuff. Into that, so yeah.
Very cool. And Aidan?
So like probably like millions of other kids in the world, I collected comics as a kid, and we trade them amongst each other and all this kind of stuff, and I had a whole box full of it, but I kept it in my basement in the apartment that I lived at with my mom, my brother at the time. But the pipe burst in this apartment, and I lost all my comics.
Yeah,
The
you
entire
hear the
thing.
sigh in the room of the pain that everybody feels.
Yeah. So it's kind of like they're gone now, but they're nice memories. But I used to love. I still have my Big Little books. I used to like those the best because they had flip cartoons in them.
Yeah.
You can flip them, and I used to turn them around the other way, and you could draw cartoons on the backside, make my own flip cartoons. So I've got all those, and I also like the almost like Archie Digest, the comic books that were like this format size, but this thick. Those kind of books. I like that. There was a physicality of the comic books. Like I like comic book size was fine, but I preferred the Big Little books, this different formats. So I was interested in the way they packaged the comics themselves. So yeah, I think for me it was just a matter of, like I said, millions of other kids would collect comics, enjoy them, trade them. So it was an influence in that way, but no kind of a directive way as far as I can notice. Although I could be wrong.
Well, we'll see. We'll see as we go along. One of the things that I find really fascinating too with comics and the arts, which is the center point of what we're our gathering tonight, is the fact that there's always been an asymmetrical relationship between the two worlds, between the comics world and the graphic arts world and the arts world, and you can put quotation marks around those titles. And I'm wondering if you've ever encountered that in your art practice, whether when you're introducing ideas that come from inspiration from the comics world, whether there is that resistance between the two worlds, as it were. Has anyone ever encountered that with your work?
I try to not think about it. You know what I mean? Because if you start like, you're gonna psych yourself out a little bit. I mean, within reason. It's just like, I think the best thing is to just make stuff, and then later on you're like, oh yeah, that is a comic, or like this, or I can feed from that, or whatever, and just to like make a whole, just spaz out and do your thing, and then you're like, oh, now it's a song. You know what I mean, or what, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's for me personally, because if I overthink it,
for sure,
it's like anything else, you can't over. But that's for me personally.
I'm too new to have that conflict because I still feel I'm lucky that Janet invited me to be in this festival. But and I don't segregate one type of art from another.
Yeah.
But I can imagine that happens. I just love all the work in the show,
Absolutely.
and I've loved Anna's work for a long time. And thank you again for letting me in the show.
I think the same idea. You let the chips fall where they may, like you're saying. Just kind of, you're not going to say, well, I shouldn't do that because it could be perceived as this, and like, there's a cultural bias against that. And if you feel naturally inclined to something, you're just going to do it, produce it, and work on it, and make it, change ideas around. One idea begets another, and just put it out there. And then, like I said, just throw the cards all on the table.
Yeah.
It lands up, face down, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of fun in that. It's like playing a chess game with yourself. One move begets another.
Yeah, and it's sometimes fun to like, well, annoying also too, but sometimes you let like gallery people or other friends decide what is what.
Sure.
You know what I mean? They combine, they go, well, this is connected to this, and you're like, you don't even know I made this thing. You know, it's like, so it all just comes together.
Yeah, connections emerge spontaneously.
Totally.
For sure.
Yeah.
One of the things that we hear is, and this phrase comes up a lot, is with comics, it's not just for kids anymore. And that's one of those legitimizing phrases that we can move it away from children into an adult world and give it that gravity. But one of the things that I find fascinating is the way in which, and this is my speculative leap, but each of you also embrace the levity of the comic and graphic arts and those characteristics that come in. So that childhood aspect, on the one hand, of course, perhaps some people do need to be reminded that, comics are to be taken seriously on. But on the other hand, there's something about the levity of that childhood experience that comes in. And I'm thinking of Aidan, your exhibition titles like Lost Boy, or Confessions of a Former, or is it a Former Toddler?
Yeah.
And James, you have the way in which you repurpose and you circuit bend children's toys, that comes in, and that levity comes back with that element. And Maureen, of course, the Cocktail Kids, something that you're working on right now. How is that? Is that levity something that gets at something that another genre might not be able to get to? That childhood experience?
Maybe. I love Edward Gorey, and he was doing that for decades when some people were like, what the heck is he doing? I mean, his alphabet it's still amazing to look at. And he was an amazing artist and amazing person too. So he was doing that for decades.
Yeah.
I always thought I'd like to meet him, but he died in 2000, so too late. Next lifetime.
Indeed.
But he gave that kind of levity and humor, twisted as it was, into a lot of his work.
Absolutely.
I agree with Maureen because I loved Edward Gorey's stuff too. Well, as a kid, I used to I had a rapidograph pen. It was a 00, and it had like a really fine line, and it was always a consistent line, which I liked. So I used to do riffs on my own Edward Gorey things, with people getting bricks on the head, people cutting their arms off, and things like that, and make a text to go with it. But it was all riffs on Edward Gorey.
Yeah.
Well, for me personally, like it's okay. There's a couple things. First of all, like I know it's sort of stupid, but that Toys R Us thing, I don't want to grow up because if I ever did, I mean, I don't care about Toys R Us personally, but like I was just like, yeah, I don't like when I saw that, I was like, I don't want to be other older folks I know. You know what I mean? Like right away, I was like, that's the right idea.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was just like, I'm not gonna grow up.
Yeah.
And like, sure, there's a lot of problems that come with that, but it's like I'm willing to do. At this point, it's like proved best for me. Like it really has.
Yeah.
And a side note of that too, though, is that okay, because we're like in a public space, I'm having like a brain blank. But comic book artist, she's amazing. And I will like I'll say her name again another time, but like I know this is stupid, like I love her work and I have a bunch of her comics. I was at a talk with her and she was talking about, so please forgive me for getting your name right now because I'm just like, it's this public thing, right? But the thing is that she was talking about how, and I've referenced this a lot too actually, even with Nihilist Spasm Band, I did an article about them and I referenced this idea before too, is that kids play, right? But they play serious. And it's not about having fun. What's that? Linda Bear, yes. Sorry. Yeah, like amazing. But so this speech almost gave me this talk I was at maybe 6 years ago where she's talking. I was like, it kind of gave me like oh, it's okay to do that then. I can talk about that more and be that way because it's like. I think her thing was talking about like a kid playing with his food, and he's like, and the parent goes, "Don't play with your food," and he's not playing with it. He's friggin' serious that he's turned his bacon into a snowboard, and he's like, riding it around the edge of the bowl. And this kind of thing, he's dead serious. I think that was their example, but like that to me is like playing isn't always, and that's this thing about being an artist. All the time, people are like, "What do you even do all day?" You know what I mean? I get that all the time. It must be so nice, like as if I'm like. Picking flowers and jumping around the yard, and like, you know what I mean, and like whatever, this kind of thing. It's like I'm back there stressing out, seriously, like I'm in it, and this. So I mean, but I was a kid doing the same thing, like as many of you probably know, you're playing. Yeah, I'm building a friggin' igloo right now, or I'm building this massive fort. Like this is serious work, and it's what you're thinking about when you go home, like as if it's a job. You know what I mean? So it's this kind of thing, like that aspect of like, oh, it's so childlike for you to do this thing. It's like, yeah, but it was serious then and it's serious now, but it's still playing.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So I got to give her respect for bringing this thing, putting stuff into words, like a thing you've been thinking about for a long time.
Absolutely. One thing I'm thinking about that too, and you've made an excellent point about the seriousness that actually sometimes comes with levity. And I'm thinking of Maureen recently. You've talked about how the graphic novel allowed you an entry point to address something that was really serious to you, which is an illness experience, the experience of dystonia. And I'm wondering at that time when you were going to produce your graphic novel, the Cocktail Kids emerged as a way, was it levity? Was it something that allowed for you to approach something, and the Cocktail Kids came at that collision of levity and gravity?
That's exactly it. The Cocktail Kids allowed me. And first it was just sort of along the edges and the borders of the pages, and then more so, but it allowed me to express things that I could hardly express, not just about illness, but my sister's death and other things with these, jaunty little cute characters that allowed me to say things in a way that was bearable.
Yes.
And they are so darn cute.
Yeah, absolutely, yes, indeed. And everyone will have a chance to see the Cocktail Kids here. Can you talk about some of the Cocktail Kids? I have some of the names here. Includes Liam, Rudy, Maud, Nigel, Ruby. Oh, Ruby, yes. And Elegant Eye, and the Cocktail Cats. Could you describe some of the...
Right. So initially, when I was working on Kite Dream, they were just stand-ins for what I was talking about for myself and other people. But then as they emerged out of Kite Dream and took on a life of their own, I did the alphabet book, which will actually be ready in June. And then I've been working with two women who are creative marketers.
Yeah.
And they were very encouraging about just sort of taking the Cocktail Kids and giving them individual personalities. And we're going to do a web site where they have stories and cartoons, and the cats are based on my own 3 cats, which happen to be adorable. And the Elegant Eye, which is a strange eye with legs, that was something I was doodling since I was a teenager.
Yeah.
So I thought, this is your moment,
Oh,
Elegant
wow.
Eye.
Yeah, hits the stage. Yes, wonderful. One of the things that comes with the graphic and comic arts is recurring characters, and I'm thinking to leap over to Aidan, that you have a character, the Gourd Man.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about the background and how the genesis of this particular character?
Yeah, I haven't used it in a long time, but it's still there.
Yeah.
I just saw him last night. I opened up the drawer in his tall cabinet, and he's still in there with the headless doll. With the door closed. So the Gourd Man it's a marionette figure. It stands about this tall, and it's got this smiling face. It's got this fixed smile and big bug eyes and this kind of triangle nose. And as far as I can tell, I've had people look at it, including people from the Macintosh Gallery, just like a long time ago, and they said it was probably from Germany in the 1920s, as far as I can discern. but it came from the attic of my grandparents' funeral house in Niagara Falls. And it was in a trunk in the attic. And when they sold the place in 1973, they had I guess a standing deal to go back and pick up things out of the trunk and pick up things out of the attic and old past family things. So in that, one of these trunks was this Gordman thing, and it came to me. And my stepmother showed it to me. She said, "Aidan, do you see this?" I immediately cottoned on to it. So this is something about this thing I could do, and I had no idea. But I took it home and I made all these used the face and the body part, and I made all these different paintings and slogans. And actually, the first time I got unemployed, I loved unemployment. I lost my job, and I said, "That's fantastic!" And I immediately got my duffel bag and went down to Cops Build downtown. I said, "Cut me 20 circles that are 14 inches across, whatever it is, on MDF, where the hell it was at the time."
Yeah.
And I had to have them shoved in this duffel bag. It was heavy as hell because I had to ride the bus. But I just figured, well, now I'm unemployed, I can make these gourd head things, these multiple versions of gourd heads. So I did that, and it went up into stickers and posters and fax art things where I had different slogans that it was always the exact same figure. I wouldn't change. I didn't need to change the way it looked. It was almost like an iconic thing. I could just use the image over and over again with it saying "Dead artists make money," false advertising sells, and I would put these posters around town on telephone poles, distribute them at the library.
But anonymously too. Is
Yes.
that the case?
Yeah.
Yes.
I would always make it go in either after 10 o'clock at night when it was dark, so no one would see me because I wasn't doing performance. I was just putting it out there. I didn't want people to see me. I wanted them to see the work. Or I'd go to the library, as you remember, and I'd slide them in books and behind a magazine. I'd grab all the magazines and just put them all behind. Someone comes to see a house and garden. This weird thing falls on the floor with this thing staring up. With some slogan on it.
Absolutely. But they started to appear in places around the city. I was thinking, I read somewhere that kids were taking and putting them in their lockers and other places.
Yeah. The guy from used to run Mary Roche. Who was the guy that ran it?
Oh, yeah, I forget.
That guy. He's
Yeah.
there's people that came up to me and said that they said, "Well, yeah, you're the guy that makes that Gordman thing. Yeah, we love that. I've got them. I used to peel them off the telephone poles, and they have rust stains in the corner. And I put them in my lockers, and we make photocopies of photocopies and stick them on our lockers. And I took on a whole life, unbeknownst to me, and things that I found out after the fact too, like years later, that how it's kind of evolved and who took it where. But it was kind of a nice way that it naturally progressed by itself.
Absolutely. And it's really fascinating too in the way that you've transformed from genre to genre in different mediums. And that's actually something I think that crosses all of your work. I'm thinking of something that I read, James, that you had said about how you sometimes are painting and then words come to you, almost like a synesthesia moment, that you actually organically cross these genres. But yet at the same time, when you talk about crossing genres, you're very careful about those bridges, that you have music and you have your visual art practice, and they do cross sometimes, but you're very careful about those movements and how they link to each other. Can you talk a little bit about that process of how you move between genres and how the links develop organically in your work?
It's funny. I think I know kind of that interview that I did where I was talking about that, and it's like I feel now some things have changed a little bit. Because at one point I was like, I'm making rap music, and then I'm making paintings, and I'm doing I have this I was participating in work outside on walls and trains and different things like that. And the first thing you touched on about the words coming was I was really young, but I remember I was so nervous, spray painting on stuff outside, and it was just I don't know if it was a reaction to certain things, but words were going through my head, and I was like, these are really weird and they were nonsensical. But I tried to recreate that feeling again and write down some of these ideas and these words and these different things. And at the time, me and my friends were doing a lot of this freestyle rap stuff, and we were just making it up on the spot, and I still do that kind of thing, and it's fun. So this word thing kind of came from this painting as a nervous reaction, I think, to things.
Yeah.
It was very strange. I remember that, and so then that became this other thing. So that kind of jumped into that too, and then for a long time I was really trying to keep things separated for a while there. Because I was I wanted gallery stuff to be gallery stuff, and then other things to be, because it was almost I don't know, as much as like, I basically would always have my paintings around my bed, or around my bedroom, or around the space I lived all the time. So it was like, there was constantly things going on in this, but I just wanted, I don't know, for a while I just really wanted to be separated, but now it's like, when I started circuit bending instruments, and then they were for my live music performances, because I lost, like, wouldn't have a DJ to work with me anymore, so I'd be like on stage, like wanting to produce instruments live, and then playing them in like noise band things that other people were doing, and then becoming too big to almost bring to shows or play in shows, and then dealing with galleries that actually were like, these are interesting objects, can we show them in the space and have people play them? And I was like, well, this used to be a sound instrument, but now it's a thing.
Oh, wow.
You know, so it's a legitimate crossover, and I was like, well, this allows me to use other materials. And then, you know, it's weird selling art and everything like that, but it's like such a good way to make other things happen, and it's such a good excuse from everything from like, I have a show in that town, so I have to go there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, as much as, you know, it starts off convincing your friends or people you're in relationships, I have to go to San Francisco. You know what I mean? Or like your family or whatever, I gotta go, you know? And then, so you end up there, or this kind of thing. The same thing is like crossing over, like, I have to order the expensive buttons to make my instrument work now, because it's gonna go in a gallery, you know? Or this kind of thing, you know? So it's almost like making excuses to yourself too, you know? It's like your inner voice, it's probably created from your parents and this kind of thing, but, you know, which isn't bad, it's just there, you know. So now it's like, now it's such a blur, and I used to do, you know, like the Thesis Sahib thing that was like work outside, but then it became like my rap name, and then I started Gymnasium or Jim Sahib stuff that was like the noise thing, and then, but like the last year I was booked at some shows, like I played a show at Museum London, and like this other festival and some other festivals just as James Kirkpatrick, and they're like, we don't care what you do it all, you know what I mean? Like, play your Game Boys and rap. And I was like, okay, cool. So now it's like, just all of a sudden I'm like, maybe it's just James Kirkpatrick doing whatever the
That's
hell.
interesting.
So, you know what I mean? Like, maybe, like, so I don't know, which is weird, but I'll ride it out and see where that goes.
Yeah.
But just currently, it's like I'm playing shows just as my real name, and like doing, so now it's a total mess. You know,
Well, and it sounds like quite an evolution, and I'm thinking that actually is a great segue to Maureen, where you started off as just as James had started off with graffiti and music, you'd started off as a writer for the first 10 years, and then you moved into the visual arts, and now you're coming back to merge the two. Has that given you any trepidation in terms of taking two interests that you've had and bringing them together? Has it been a liberation? What's the experience been?
No, it's been great. And during the 70s when I was writing, I was also doing a lot of drawing, hundreds of drawings, with children's illustrations, with which I did nothing. But it allowed me to, my style formed during that. And so now after years of painting, I find that I'm using black and white and other things I used years ago, but everything I learned in the intervening time. And I'm certainly going back to painting. And still painting as time allows, even right now, but it's, I forget what the point was.
Oh, and just in how you merge the different aspects of your
Yes,
art.
I did.
Yes.
Sorry, I went off on it.
No, not at all. But I find it interesting because, of course, that is one of the paradigmatic things of the comic and graphic arts is combining image and text.
Well, yes, and I do love writing. And I've always written, but just really journal things about the art I was doing at the time.
Yeah.
But just keep
And reading
that.
poetry. And reading
And
poetry.
reading poetry every day.
Yeah, so like
Sure.
like cartoons as inspiration, you have poetry that you're reading. Can you think of, off the top of your head, some of the poets that have really been
Oh
inspirational
my
for
God.
you? I'm putting you on the
See,
spot.
now I'm a blank.
Yeah.
I have like 10 of them. I'll get back to you on that.
Sure, no problem, absolutely. I moved down to for a question for Aidan. One of the things that I find really fascinating too, and it goes back to Gordman and what you did with that, is the relationship that you've made between the art object, the artist, and the audience, and the way that you went out into the streets and we're starting to renegotiate that in a way that's going to engage your audience. How important is that of trying to find new ways to engage audiences to almost break through that passivity or to resist that way in which we engage with the arts?
I think it's kind of a constant battle, but that doesn't mean it's a negative thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I find it, it's, for my own work, and it's good to go out and, you obviously put work on the wall, you're in a gallery space, but there's ways to even promote the work or make it different, to bring different aspects to it.
Yeah.
It could be something that happens in the street, or the way that you mail out an invite that has a certain image on it. It might be followed by another invite with a different image, but for the same show. It's not just a standard where there's the work,
Yeah.
there's the invite, there's the date,
Yeah.
we're done. It's a lot of work, like you were saying too, like being serious about it.
Yeah.
It's a hell of a lot of work.
Yeah.
It can be a pain in the ass sometimes.
Yeah. Well, the worst thing is like the music people see the one thing and the art people see the other, and they go, "Wow, is that all you do?" I don't know.
Yeah.
But sometimes, you know, like so it feels a little bit weird sometimes.
Yep,
You know, because
exactly.
people only see one side of it, and then you can't tell your parents you're out sticking stuff up around town.
No.
You know, and they're like, "Well, what'd you do all last week?" You're like, "I vandalized the city." You know what I mean? Like, you know, and,
That's
you can't
probably,
say
yeah,
that.
it's probably true, because I did
Yeah.
stick them on light poles too, and I thought, shit, I
Right.
wouldn't do that now. I would, if my kids did that, I said, don't stick that on that light pole, and I thought, shit, I did it.
Yeah.
Did you ever have unexpected outcomes? Faxing, because it's an audience that technically you know where it's going because you're faxing it to some individual or group, but did you ever have unexpected outcomes from the mail art and the fax art?
Oh,
I won't tell the Habib Nadimi thing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that was a different story, but yeah, I've had different reactions. I got some of the things I didn't say at that talk. I think I got a letter or fax from the city of Glasgow asking me to stop faxing them. The city council said, please stop faxing these images from Canada or London, Ontario, Canada. We don't appreciate it in Glasgow. I thought, you cheap Scottish bastards. You can't even afford 5 cents worth of fax paper. And then the whole truth about Scottish people being cheap
Yeah.
comes true. And my name's Urquhart, which is Scottish. I'm allowed to say that.
Hey, both my parents are from Glasgow, man.
Are they?
It was actually my parents who were
probably
faxing. I just
was
wanted to tell
city
you.
council
Yeah, yeah.
So I got very good reactions about that, and the head Navy guy is calling me a fucking asshole on the telephone. I got a call from the head of the Ontario Arts Council one day, and Karen Vesely, she said, hey, I just wanted to call, and we've got some complaints from some people who called into our office, and they always seem to call in the morning to these people. I don't know what they must be fired up and they just waiting for the office to open. And they said, well, we just want to add, she said, well, we've got some complaints, and they said that you sent some faxes through, and there was an evening, and they went to their galleries, and they were angry about it, and there was an Ontario Arts Council logo was on it. And I said, well, yeah, and she said, well, and I said, well, it was on there because it has the grant that I received. In that grant, it said I was part of the project was going to involve fax art component.
Oh, man.
In the fax art component, I have to give an acknowledgement to Ontario Arts Council.
Smart.
She said,
Smart.
that sounds good, thanks, Aidan. I never heard from her again. All she wanted to know is to shut down the people that were calling the Ontario Arts Council complaining about an art project. Like what? Like I said, go complain about Ford or Pfizer or Donald Trump with billboards in your face, but you come after artists who are trying to give out different ideas. That's a different thing.
Yeah, I really like that you mentioned that in your last. You did this kangaroo talk, and it was awesome. And yeah,
Thank
I
you.
love that you were talking about like, I mean, people even ripping it down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's in my face. I hate this. You know what I mean? But it's like, you know, McDonald's or whoever
Oh,
the hell, or
exactly.
like, you know, real bad companies. You know.
Yep. They don't rip that down.
They
Don't
don't-
leave that
yeah.
around. It's just one little piece of an image, and all around you is this corporate barrage that they ignore.
Absolutely. One of the things too, and that audience engagement that you do, that's really fascinating, and the aleatory effects that come from it. The other thing too is the objects that you use. And I was even looking at the works here presented with different collaged on pieces, but bottle caps. How do you go about deciding what material goes into composing a work? How do you find these materials, and how does it come together?
Part of it's like almost like just living in general. Like some of the stuff that's in there, I can see it from now. It's a hell money from Chinatown in Toronto, and I bought it probably 10, 15 years ago, and I bought stacks of it.
Yeah.
Because at the time I also stuck the Gordman head on the Hell bank money,
Yeah.
and it was $10,000 bills, and I was just giving it out left and right. I'd give it out at grocery stores, and I'd go to a bar, I'd like at a museum in London. Then they had the tip jar. I'd give them $10,000, put it in there and walk away. I would lay money out left, right, and center because this Hell money.
Yeah.
So it's just things that catch my eye when I'm going around, like things like the beer caps. I don't want to throw away beer caps. I mean, there's something about them that they're almost
Yeah.
like little ready-made pieces of art, and I knew
Yeah.
at some point I'd be able to use them.
Mm-hmm.
So I just would throw them into a box or into a bag, and I'd save them. I had bags of them in around the house, of beer
Yeah.
caps. And for this project, and there's another project that's going to be for a show that happens in a month from now, that I'm still using more beer caps and screwing them into the same style as this, is screwing them into the surface of the wood.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of it's just an idea of odd objects that seem they're rudimentary. They're not fancy. They're not sexy and glossy. But they're if you take the ordinary and put them somewhere else, they can become slightly extraordinary in a way, depending how you arrange them.
Mm-hmm. It makes them uncanny in a word, almost unhomely, that they're out of the place that they were supposed to be.
Yeah, and not just thrown in the garbage or found rusting in the backyard. Or
And that actually is a great segue to James, because you find materiality to make your works, whether it's electronics, whether it's different surfaces to paint on. How do you find your material that goes into making your works?
I used to find a lot of stuff just actually in the train yard. When I go back to take pictures the next day, I would go and really find a lot of different wood and metal and things like that. So I would just collect all that stuff, and it would sort of be I think a response to what was going on, in other places and stuff, and in alleyways, walking up and down alleyways or whatever, taking pictures of different things or looking at stuff. And, even being in other cities, other countries, just grabbing, usually found stuff in the garbage. I was doing a lot of found object work, and I still have so much stuff that I've flown from Halifax or shipped in Greyhound from one part of Canada to the other and back and forth and stuff. And I'd even bring piles of junk home with me to if I was coming home for breaks and stuff like that, or different things, staying at my folks' house or whatever, or just 'cause I kind of have little junk piles all over the place. So that thing, those are mainly fabrics and woods and stuff like that. Kind of recently got a little bit paranoid about bed bugs and stuff. I've never had bed bugs, and I just have people being don't, because trash days were amazing to go out and because I'd be walking from Old East to Old South and back often, in one night, and I would just amass really cool weird metals and wood and rotten stuff or whatever, just different things. So that idea, and then a lot of thrift store hunting and just not really wanting to not really buying clothes from department stores or stores or whatever, and then just kind of being in thrift stores all the time, looking for fabrics, and then finding electronics, kids electronics, and other stuff, just cool things from thrift stores and that kind of thing. So and just sort of having this game too of willing things to happen, I need another Darth Vader mask, and going into Valley Village and finding one, you know what I mean, or I need another one of those sleep machines so I can circuit bend it, and white noise machines and stuff. I find those all the time, but I just when I focus on it, I need one, I generally can make one appear or something.
Omnipotence of thoughts.
Yeah, it happens. I don't know what's up, but it happens. I believe in that. So, I have a lot of Darth Vader masks. I give them away sometimes. Yeah, Jason McLean's kids have a couple of them.
That's interesting. A link that you share with Maureen, which I thought was really fascinating. It's probably a link that many of us share, but is the concern with the lake, or the interest in the lake. You have art that revolves, Maureen, around the image of the lake. What is it about the experience of being by water, by the Great Lakes, by the lakes in Ontario and beyond that really inspires your work?
Gosh, I just find the energy from water magical. But can I just change the topic slightly?
You certainly
to
can.
Go back to what
Absolutely.
you're saying about the found objects?
Yes.
I don't think Sheila Kernow's here, so I'll tell the story unedited. But years ago, after Greg Kerner had died, I was at Sheila's house, and she had a box of stuff that belonged to Greg. And included in it was a whole bunch of beer mats, because he was always saving stuff up to use.
Yep.
And she said, "You want these?" I was like, "Okay." So then after that, I did a huge portrait of Sheila in the shape of a wine glass with big bolts through it, something Greg would have loved. And it was surrounded by the beer mats. And then in the background, I had some of their 1960s wallpaper from their house, which another friend took out of Sheila's garbage to give me.
Oh, wow.
So that was the background. And then I finished the piece, and Sheila saw it, and she was looking at it, and she was like, "Jesus, I gave you those mats, and now I have to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars to get the damn things back." It's hanging in her house, so it's like, and I said, "You don't have to buy it." She said, "Yeah, I do though." She'll never get rid of them. Anyway, sorry, going back to the lake.
I'm
And,
glad you
yeah,
mentioned that.
I do
That's
have
good.
a 15-foot lake in my backyard, and it was my first experience with spray paint, which was exhilarating. I spray painted a mural around the whole, it's an above-ground pool.
Mhm.
And just to give me the feeling that I have a lake in my backyard, unlike my friend Mark, who actually does have a lake in her backyard. But there's something about water that I find very magical.
Mhm.
Were you in the pool while spray painting the?
No,
That'd be cool.
well, actually, I was in the pool doing the inside trim.
Cool.
So,
Was it full of water though?
yeah, it was. And that's, I mean, I had a piece of cardboard that I was holding so the paint wouldn't go
Wouldn't
into
go
the
in the
water.
water.
Because I forgot this ridge around the inside. I was like, oh no, that's got to be painted.
Did you grow up near water? Was water something that always has
Well,
been?
I grew up in Hamilton, about a mile from Lake Ontario.
Mhm.
So we would go there constantly in the summer. And when I was a kid, my parents are both from Nova Scotia, so we would go there, and to me that was just like paradise, the ocean.
Mhm. And you draw from the symbolism of things like the mermaid. Is that something that has particularly been a fascinating?
It has been for the last few years, or last several years. And that's what is painted around that pool I have. I love mermaids. I'm just the idea of the sea.
Mhm. Wonderful. And James, the lake, I know it's in the title of your show at Macintosh.
Mhm.
Could you maybe explore what the meaning of the lake is for you?
Well, okay. So the title of that show, "Secret Base by the Lake," was about a few things, but so like, I used to have a cool space over there right near the Thames River, and and I live still near the Thames River, so I was thinking about that water.
Yeah.
But I was also thinking about and like building forts down by, like I was always down by the Thames doing stuff under bridges or whatever, and having spaces that we would consider ours. Like me and my friends would hang out there on weekend nights, and like have little fires and stuff. So it was like kind of like a lake, but it was a pond, but then also, or it's just a river. I mean, and then I grew up around Lake Huron all the time. My dad had like an old boat that he ended up getting when I was maybe like 10 or something like that, and it was basically like what we would use as our cottage. My whole family would just like cram into this boat and sleep there overnight and get up and go do stuff, and so that was on Lake Huron. And my dad from Glasgow grew up, and he worked.
Very generous guy.
Yeah, always giving.
Yes.
He worked in the shipyards, when he was a kid. So, he grew up obsessed with boats, and his brother was in the merchant navy all his life, and my dad was in there too for a long period, and then ended up moving here and then to Australia and back and forth. So I was like traveling with him. I lived with them away, and then came back, and I was young, so I was always exposed to all these different ideas of water and like being a big part of it. And maybe it's almost like 12 or 13 years ago, like we started surfing on the lakes in storms and stuff. So my dad always told me you couldn't do it, and my brother, I was in, I'd surfed in other countries or whatever, then I was like spending a lot of time in California and living there for a while, and I was surfing there with friends. And then I came back, my little brother had started surfing in the lakes here with his friends, and they had just amassed a bunch of surfboards. And they got some money from Western to start a surf club.
Oh, wow.
So they bought like a bunch of surfboards, and I was like, "This is amazing." There's like leave them at my house. I was like, "Not a problem," So we started storm surfing, and then I actually stopped doing that for a short while. But then in the last couple of years, I've been doing it more and more. And like the last year, it was just so. It was just like there was so much surfing in the lakes. It was unreal. I felt like I was like living right next to an ocean, and I've connected with a whole bunch of other, not a whole bunch, I mean like 6 other people that surf in the lakes too, and they're really passionate about it. And I mean, there is other people who do it, but there's 6 people in London in particular. Actually, let's just say 4 other people really, who are really super into it. And like my friend Justin and I, we surf all the time. We try and go on other trips. And I used to live in Halifax too, so I surf out there. And that kind of, this idea of secret base by the lake is just like, building a space or a fort or this kind of, you know, combination again, I guess, like echoing back to like childhood fort building by a space, and there's like, you know, you need a river, you need a lake, or this kind of thing.
Well, and what's interesting too is that I know you've told a story too that you take friends to like, and there's something about the community experience about water that that gathers people near water. And
or animals, and like, you know,
Absolutely.
the conversation thing. And
For
stuff,
sure.
right?
And I'm thinking too, actually, just to make a transition to actually maybe even a callback to Maureen's remark about Sheila Curnow and that influence of Greg Curnow. You have worked, and I know this is a question that you've received quite a few times, maybe I can put a graphic and comics art spin on this.
Sure.
That you guys have had the work that you've done under the collaboration of the New Regionalists, which calls back that heritage that we have in London, Ontario, of London regionalism that I mentioned at the top. And I know one of the things that's really fascinating that links the New Regionalists, I'm thinking of Jamie Q and Mark Bell and Jason McLean, is the use of comics and the use of cartoon-inspired images in your work. It seems to me at once a departure maybe from the regionalist past, and yet it's also a connecting point for the New Regionalists.
Right.
Is this something that that is conscious? How did that thread, if it's a thread, in your work and amongst the group that you work with, how did that come in?
Well, it's interesting too, because it's one of those things, like I said, about like, you know, is it fine art or is it comics or this? You try not to think about it, and you just make and you do, right? And then you let other people decide, because they have a better idea too. So if you come out being like, I'm gonna be a pop surrealist, whatever, this and that thing, you're like, no, you're not. You know what I mean? And your collectives can't be. None of us ever went around. In fact, everyone was sort of rejecting the idea of being labeled as something.
Yeah.
Because a lot, you know, and like, well, what are you guys, this and that, and like, so for a short while, we got the name the Drawers, and I don't want to like, whoever said that, that's very nice and stuff, but like, I do a heck of a lot more than draw.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And because drawing was a hip thing in fine art, and like, a lot of us were sort of included in some like important drawing shows for a while. Like, I think that's where it came from, but the Drawers or whatever, like, that just like does not sum up even close. And then, so to be called like New Regionalist or whatever, like it's an honor in a lot of ways, but I'm gonna be like, that's cool, but I'm just gonna do what I do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to tell you the truth, like, I mean, like, I'm still working with a lot of the core people within that group, but everybody's moved out of town. Myself and like, you know, Billy Bird are pretty much the only one of that sort of core group, I think, that is still living in town. I mean, we're all in communication and this and that, but, and there is a lot of, that's the thing, is that you can't, undoubtedly, you can't deny the fact that there is this, like, with the regionalist people at that time, I mean, they were often speaking about their hometown. You know, that was kind of the thing, like, it was commenting on this and like, we don't need other places and this and that. So there's actions that have definitely gone against, not intentionally, but that are definitely like, Curnow would be like, fuck that, you guys are not, you know what I mean? But then there's other things that are definitely, you know, like the fact that I do go to the States, and I used to participate in a lot of art things in the States, but I really brought it home and like, was like, you know, left a lot of galleries I was dealing with in different states and stuff like that to focus on being in London, you know, around 2008 and stuff. I remember making a distinct decision, like, I want to work in more artist-run centers, and I want to, you know, if I'm going to deal with fine art places, it's going to be within these contexts and these rules, and this is what I want to do. And I'm thinking about my surroundings. My friend's comics reference, like Mark Bell's stuff really references a lot of London stuff, you know, all this Jason McLean's comic, you know, maps, zines, all this stuff references tons of stuff in London. My things are about, like, my comics are about issues like, you know, like stupid ideas about being in noise bands and, you know, these perceptions of what it is from London to observe outside, like observing America, observing, you know, other countries, and bringing their influence and their pop stuff into this like mashed up thing that becomes what my work is, or what the comic books are and different things. So to me, that is a new way of being a regionalist, because with, you know, with these things that are bombarding us all the time, like how, you know, and I don't want to put like a claim on that either, because I'll just let it be what it is and people can argue against it. But they're, you know, and even, I might be rambling here, but like even like the stuff that Curnow and Favreau and these people were doing, like, you know, I'm involved in intuitive noise and intuitive vocals in this sort of dadaist approach, neo-dadaist approach that like all those guys were considered too and stuff. And you can't deny Curno's influence from maybe some stuff that was going on in New York, Rauschenberg, and these kind of things, and that, and like, you know, the way his stuff is assembled and found object stuff. Like, there's so many similarities that, like,
Yeah.
like we can all put our middle fingers up to the, you know, the policies and the bad stuff that goes on in America and this kind of stuff, but like, you know, there's wonderful art that comes from there, and there's wonderful people and friends that
Sure.
are from there, and so there is, you know, there is influences in this and that. We can be originalist, and, you know, I live in London, and I've always come back no matter where the hell I'm living.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
So I don't know. It's
No, that's wonderful.
tough and loaded
Very
thing that I do
generous
think
response.
about, but I try not to think about.
Yes.
You know, it's like,
Very much so.
you know.
To Aidan, is the regionalist legacy, I know you're a London-based artist, is that something that informs your work? Is it something that's in your subconscious? Is it something you're actively thinking about? Do you engage with it?
No, I don't really kind of put the label on myself like that way, just
Yeah.
like you're saying.
Mhm.
It's kind of something I was preceded myself, and it's all fantastic stuff, and I don't not acknowledge it. I obviously acknowledge it.
Mhm.
I don't consider myself a regionalist, or
Yeah.
when I work in London, Ontario, I just happen to be working in London, Ontario.
Yeah.
But the work that I do doesn't have any, it's not specific about this is Richmond Street at
Yeah.
12 o'clock. This is something about London, Ontario in particular. It just happens to be the work like that stuff over there. There's things in there, but there's nothing particularly about London, Ontario. It just happens to be that I made it here because I'm
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Not that it's, I'm not trying to disparage that.
No, not at all.
But yeah, I never really kind of gave it, because people put that on me as well, like you must be you're like a regionalist artist. I just say, well, like you said, I'm going to do what I'm going to do.
Mhm.
You're going to call me this, put it in print or whatever, but I'm going to continue on and do my thing. I mean, I can't stop them from saying that, and they're coming up with different ideas. I'm not going to stop them. I think as much ideas as you can throw at something is the better. Because the way I approach things too, I leave it open-ended. I'd rather be inclusive as opposed to exclusive.
Yeah.
To include more people, more ideas, because there's things that they come to my work and say, well, I see this and that. So, well, I never thought about that, but that's completely valid. It's
Yeah.
absolutely fantastic, because I could maybe take the idea that they had and go with it, or they come with different perspectives.
Yeah.
Maureen, I just wanted to say, I also had an experience with Greg Cornell's garbage. I'm going to say quick, because you caught me on that one.
Yeah.
A few people did.
Sheila, of course, she must have been purging all this stuff, and I happened to be driving down Weston Street with Wendy, my wife at the time, well, my wife right now too.
My wife at the time.
I was with us in the room. So I was driving down Weston Street, and we were looking, and said, there's Sheila Cornell and Rick Cornell's old houses. Shit, there's garbage bags in this too. What is she throwing out? We drove by real slow, and we looked at it, there's books in there, because it was a blue clear bag. It says, turn around, and I drove around the block, it says, cut the lights. We cut the lights, and cut the motor. We're in the standard, we just closed it up. It says, put the hatch open. And we started throwing in garbage bags in the back trunk. Oh yeah, there's all these books in that, and big little books.
She stopped,
Yeah.
she stopped putting her garbage out.
Yeah, she did. And she came over and saw the work that I was doing. She says, I said, well, yeah, Sheila, I took your Greg's garbage and I made this artwork out of it. And she says, oh, I'm going to buy that. And I told her the price. She says, what? I'm not buying that. The same thing from you.
That's funny.
But yeah,
She did give me those things, so I didn't go into it.
Oh, I took it from the garbage. I stole it. Absolutely. And Greg would have liked that. I think he would have loved that if he knew somebody drove up, cut the lights, threw things in the back of the trunk, and put it in gear and sped away.
Probably, yes.
But yeah, and I found there was one little big little book that I didn't cut up. I used some of the pictures for an art project, but one of them had all these rubber stamps in them that he did things in. I said, shit, I'm gonna keep that. I put it in like a plastic wrapper and just stored it away. Because of course she was just throwing things out, and I said, I had enough of that. And so I forgot where I was going with this, but that was my side.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful story. Actually, you know what? I don't want to hog the floor either. Maybe I could turn it over to everybody in the room. If you have questions that you'd like to ask our three feature artists today.
Can I just say something
You
first?
certainly can.
I remembered some of the poets. That
Good,
we
yes,
did.
exactly. Call back, yes.
Marianne Moore, Adrian Rich, the fabulous Stevie Smith, and there's a wonderful movie of her life starring Glenda Jackson. And hey Nadine, do you remember who wrote the 12-spoke wheel turning? Oh man, I read that. It's a wonderful collection of poetry. The woman's name's gone out of my mind, but I highly recommend it. Okay.
Wonderful. Any questions for our feature artists?
Just like being back in high school.
Yeah.
Anyone?
Anyone
Bueller.
brave?
Bueller.
Yeah.
Get up and walk away and 3 people ask you something.
Yeah.
We have a question over here. Yes.
I guess, James, you might know about this, but I hope you know. It just seems that in Quebec, just spending a little more time, they have a great deal more enthusiasm for graphic stuff.
Yeah.
Drawing quarterly from there and stuff. I don't know if that's, I just don't know the scene here as much, but.
Yeah, I mean,
And in Europe too.
yeah, in Europe?
And
Yeah,
back
definitely.
in Europe, like they can kind of cross over too.
Yeah, I mean, they're smart people. France, there's like such a great graphic novel. What's the word? I don't know. Yeah, like all. Yeah, exactly. Like so much. I mean, they appreciate stuff. They like love Mark Bell. You know what I mean? They love people from London. You know, like. And music and interesting music and art. I mean, those people are just raised in such a smart way. And I think they're reading philosophy when they're in like public school or whatever, you know, like, and so it's just like, it's, you know, and then of course there's like French culture in Quebec and stuff. But I mean, I've mentioned this before lots of times, but I went into like the coolest, like, you know, little indie art record store that sells like, you know, very exciting, you know, experimental electronic and, you know, every kind of weird music you could ever want, and these amazing silkscreen art books that are fantastic and stuff in Paris. I walked in there on tour, and you know, you open the door and the first thing I saw was a gigantic red Nihilist Spasm band shirt. You know, and it's just like, I was just like, holy shit. I was like, I know these guys. You know? And the guys were like, what? You know these guys? And I'm like, yeah. And it just gave me cool points right away. And I was like, yeah, like I'm jammed with these dudes. They're cool, man. You know, like they're nice. And then looking through the comic section, I'm like, oh, here's Mark's books, and here's, you know, other friends from London and all this stuff like that. And I was like, I know these dudes too. And they're like, and I'm like, do you want to buy any magazines? They're like, yes. You know these guys are cool. So yeah, except they said it in French, but it was like, you know, yeah. I mean, they just recognize, and they like Japanese too a lot. There's a lot of. I mean, I don't know what it is. I'm confused and I don't know what's up with London sometimes. You know what I mean? I love it here. I mean, but other people love what's going on here.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's like there's underground rap from here that just never went anywhere that people are obsessed with in other countries.
Yeah.
You know, I'll go to their house and they'll be like, have you heard these guys? And I'm like, yeah, this is Makeshift Einsteins. Like I used to make them open all my shows because they're amazing, you know, and like, oh, cool. Well, there's a couple YouTube videos and we're obsessed with these guys.
When you were in Japan, you also noticed that people knew the Nihilist Spasm
Of
band,
course,
which is astonishing.
Yeah, people came. Like I was talking to lots of people who knew them before and stuff, and almost these people were also like, well, why aren't you playing the same shows that those guys would play, like noise shows and different things? And I'm like, well, I'm here under different circumstances. So.
That is something about regionalism, though, that it tends, when you have a concentration in a region, it tends to have a global appeal that people, I don't know whether there's a romantic quality of thinking about a concentration of artists in an area that people from elsewhere know, or they collect, or they follow those concentrations. Have you found that when you go elsewhere?
Definitely. I mean, that's almost historical though with art too, right?
Yeah.
You know, in a lot of ways, well, so-and-so knows this guy and that guy. And even if they don't hang out or if they're fighting even, you know what I mean? Like, people are like, oh yeah, they used to hide, you know, secrets from each other and it's known. You know what I mean? Because they used to like have, I think that's almost like going back to this like manifesting and energy kind of thing, you know what I mean? Or whatever you want to call it, you know? And it's like, as soon as you start like a thing with somebody, it's going to be there. It's going to be recognized in other places because you're going to go there and, well, so-and-so is going to shit talk that guy. And you're like, well, I'm going to check out his album anyways. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, that's amazing. It's great. Yeah, sure. This guy's copying him and it's awesome. You know what I mean? And like, there's that thing too. Like one person influences another person in a region and back and forth. And then there's like generations and stuff like that, like stacks of different influences and things, and whether people like it or not, like that gets recognized, and you know, that's in historical stuff and other things that have now been considered movements and you know, regional things that were going on, whether the region is like, you know, a country or a city
Yeah.
or, you know,
For sure.
that kind of thing. So I think it's natural. I think it's just maybe not to be whatever, but like a lack of something in a city such as London maybe makes it that we have to identify some of those other good things, and that like those weirdos or those people doing stuff that are seen
Yeah.
are gonna have like people are gonna be like, well, there are those guys.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And there's those, you know, so whereas sometimes like in other cities where there's like tons of people doing these cool things, it's harder to recognize certain, and you know, different people rise to the top or this kind of thing. So,
Absolutely.
but in a city like where there's few, they're all gonna get identified. The other thing is too is like if I mean I sort of feel like maybe there's like an inclusiveness. I'm not trying to be a dick here, but like, you know, like there was like a crew of people in the past being the regionalist or whatever, and that was sort of like their thing.
Yeah.
Whereas like the people now that would be considered new regionalists like are cool with other people being new
Yeah,
regionalists.
yeah,
like we're not
for
being
sure.
like, no, it's us, dude.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? And like it's like to me, if what I'm doing is new regionalist, like you know, it's like the same, you know,
Mhm.
thing. So just people doing stuff
For sure. Any other questions? Yep.
I'll figure this, how do you differentiate when you're working from something that's going to be reproduced versus a work that might just be a wall piece that's not?
Wow. I have discovered if you're doing something that has to be reproduced, there's a torturous amount of work. And thank you, Deanna Tamlin, for helping with my alphabet book. I was shocked. Like when you do a painting, you do the painting, there it is on wall. Take it or leave it. But if you're doing something, it has to be perfect in ways I couldn't imagine. That's just, I'm new to that, so that was my painful experience.
I'm thinking if I'm making something and it's going to get reproduced, I count myself lucky. I'll just leave it at that. I don't really make it to say, I better tweak that up, I better tune that down, or because it's going to get photographed, or then I'll just get up to the photographer saying, no, that's not right. That orange is not the way the orange is supposed to be. Do it like this. Or, but yeah, I don't make it to, because it's not a commercial thing, so I'm not designing it for a commercial purpose per se. So I don't really think about that being reproduced. I mean, it's great, like I said, it gets reproduced and photographed as long as they get it right and it's good enough.
Just to follow up to that too with Aidan, one of the things I noticed in your work is an interventionary imperative, that you almost intervene on the idea of reproducibility and the way in which some items that you repurpose, as you describe, put them in a new context and makes them extraordinary. Is that something that you're thinking of, almost intervening in that reproducibility that culture seems to be obsessed with right now too?
Well, there's a lot of throwaway stuff in culture, like they just chuck everything on. Like over there, I've cut out a thing from Eggo boxes, cereal boxes, Triscuits, and you can play with. I like to play with the texture. If you cut things down, you can just take a slice of things.
Yeah.
You can get different ideas out of it.
Absolutely.
So people can still see the logo. They'll understand that's Eggo's. That's probably from Triscuits. If you just take a piece of it. So I kind of like that idea of being able to rip pieces, almost like what you do when you're mixing tunes and that. You're taking bits and pieces.
Yeah, samples and
It's just
chopping.
the visuals.
Yeah.
It's a visual without any sound to it. It's visual
Yeah.
mixing.
That's interesting. So collage, almost like a sampling as well. Do
Yeah.
you find that when you sample music?
Well, I personally sample like circuit bend stuff,
Yeah.
so it's like I'm already taking like a noise that exists in like in like that has an application, whether it's like a kid's song
Yeah.
or like a noise that's done in some kind of way, and then circuit bending it so it's augmented and changed, and then chopping that up and slowing them down, and like, you know, and I do relate that a lot to visual stuff with collage and even just putting paint down, scratching it, scraping it, you know, sanding things down, and you know, different layers and stuff. But when I think about like reproduction of stuff, like Chaz was talking about, or like, you know, like we're talking like, I'm thinking about you and your books and your comic project, which is like, I don't even know how you're gonna do that. Like, but
Exactly.
Yeah, like, I mean, I'm kind of a mess when it comes to like, I mean, I love scanners, but like, I just need a scanner that's like that big, because that's the best thing. Because I tile together a lot of my paintings when I want to put something online. Like, I'll put that corner on the scanner and I'll throw a sweater over top of it. And I'll put that corner and that corner and that corner, and then I'll go into Photoshop and I'll like, because I'm really obsessed with the texture. For me, a lot of my stuff will not show up. And I have like my friend Matt Field, he makes his paintings right now that everyone's like, they're just dots. And I'm like, no, you have to see the thing in real life, because there's so many layers in painting and in the painting and stuff. And I just did a residency in Banff at the Banff Art Center there, and at the Barf Center. The Barf Center. Yeah.
On occasions.
Yeah, they let us drink a lot of wine there, so it was cool. But I did stuff that involved audio and visual, so I actually got to talk to a lot of sound engineers. So I'm even thinking about reproduction on that level too right now, which is like, basically I want to take all my music and just rip it apart and readjust the volume. So I'm thinking about that kind of reproduction of it, in a sense, like how's it going to appear on a car stereo versus like the reproduction on something that someone would be playing through their headphones and an MP3 player or a CD player, or often things are being released on cassette, so it's like new music, old music that I've been putting up. So I'm thinking about even the presentation of that. And then I've had a bunch of different things published, and some of them look really bad, and some of them look good, and so it's a constant struggle, and it's like just constantly learning and making mistakes. It's another element. It's like you got to shift into, I don't even know what left and right brain is anymore. You know what I mean? Like you have to be creative, all the time with all that stuff. And then online, like having a website. And that's the other thing, is like I have my art website, which combines the music and the visuals, and I'm always thinking about quality, of the picture to get the message across. And now I'm putting audio files on there and dealing with different websites that allow you certain different audio qualities, and sound sculptures and video that I make. I have to make video documentation of these pieces a lot, because you need to see how they're played and these things. So I'm thinking about reproduction all the time. And but during the creative process, like, I guess it is in there, but it's just, I try not to think about it again. I think it's that whole thing of trying to not think about it, which is maybe bad, and in like a couple of years I'll be like, I was stupid. But so.
Can I go back to something you were talking about before, which is sort of the group of artists that had been working for a long time? I just want to mention Bernice Vincent and her husband Don. Like, when I was first an artist, I wanted to do things differently. I had really excellent backing from the feminist community, but I wanted to have gallery shows sometimes, but I wanted to be centered in my studio, and they were awesome. They were so encouraging, and Bernice's work is just unbelievable. It's fabulous. But they were like, okay, then do this and don't do that, and rent the Forest City, and just have it in your studio, make that something that, and I mean, I just came from out of nowhere, and that kind of generosity I found like really, really fantastic. So just a call out to your mom.
Yeah, I mean, on that note, like.
And Chaz and Andrea were going to my art shows when they were too young to drink.
Nice. So they were coming to actually look at art, not to get drunk.
Apparently.
Nice. That means a lot. Yeah. Now, I think there's been a lot of support from older artists in this city that at one time was not there. But I mean, I wasn't in their radar either. I mean, I remember growing up and then like going to Beale in the 90s and being like, there's no artists from London. Like Beale was at a weird time too, when they weren't necessarily like telling us about the regionalist stuff. I mean, the teachers were getting worried about getting fired because they were actually smashing down Beale Art. Like my last year at Beale Art was the year that they brought like a wrecking ball and actually put it through the walls. You know what I mean? So the teachers were concerned and freaking out, and I think I got a pretty good chunk of Beale Art that really inspired me and led to other things and stuff. But I remember not knowing, so I didn't have any contact, and at the time it was like Fanshawe wasn't working with Beale, and and they weren't connected to Western, and none of those people were talking and stuff. It was a bizarre time, so I didn't even think there was really. And downtown was like, I remember going to meetings with concerned people because they wanted to start this thing and maybe call it the arts project. And like going and visiting buildings around here with these people being like, we're gonna start a community, and I was like, cool, and like not, you know, seeing it happen and being concerned and like being like, this is weird. How do you be an artist and make a living? But then as things go on and you know you do connect with these older people. I mean, there are like a lot of amazing folks who have really helped awesome stuff happen. And I mean, now we have a London Arts Council, and we have this place, and we have, you know, and that a lot of people are like, the younger generation of artists are great. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool, but there's also these people in the middle that I feel don't get a lot of recognition too. And it kind of, yeah, there's a lot of awesome stuff going on. I didn't even know that Bernice was your mom until like recently, you know, and I was like a fan of her work, and being like, that's cool, you know, but yeah, and I mean, I could go through names and stuff like that. There's a lot of people I'm just really thankful that they are here in London that made stuff happen for my friends and myself and stuff. So
Absolutely.
yeah, it's been a good scene.
A story about that too. Kind of about like the support of older artists. And this is about Murray Favreau. It's a great story that I like. It's about the idea of preciousness of art and the lack of it, and what you don't get too precious about it. He was doing his. I was at the galleries at the Galleria probably about 10 years ago, and he was making his SD diesel locomotive with its own perspective, and he was working on it into space. And I was working there with myself, Joe Price, and somebody else there at the time. And Murray, I was finishing my lunch, and Murray says, Aidan, and I know him all my life. He said, Aidan, when you're done your lunch, can you help me take this piece of the locomotive down in my car in the loading bay? Because I always thought he was like Jack Nicholson to us. Yes, totally. And I said, yeah, okay. And I said, we loaded it down and took this, it was probably about 12 feet in length. Beautiful piece of sculpture, beautiful woodwork.
Yeah.
And we went down the loading bay at the galleries, at the Galleria, and he had this Ford Escort, red Ford Escort with the hatch up, and he was trying to push it in the back. And he's pushing it in, and he said, that's not working. I said, Murray, that's not going to fit. He said, oh yeah? And he pulled out this Japanese bamboo saw. Well, make it fit. And he cut off a chunk of piece of the wood off it, threw it in the loading bay, and slammed the lid down. And drove away in his Escort. I said, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I remember telling it to a curator one time. Said, yeah, he did this, and he went, oh. So I like that idea that that's a support saying, you know, if it doesn't fit, cut a chunk off, put a piece of paint on it, and put it over there.
Wow.
That's cool you got to work on it.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I've got a question, I guess, for all of you. Instead of asking, you know, your influences, who influenced you, or what artists you like, what kind of, I could ask each of you, okay? What sort of artwork or music style or genre of writing do you really don't like? And that might give me an insight into your
That's a
actual
good
practice.
question.
You can't say each other.
You can't
Those
see.
irk hearts really, they irk
Yeah.
They irk my heart. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't like people from Glasgow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Canadian Tire Money is racist. Just saying. It's got a Scottish dude in it. Save your pennies.
yeah.
You know.
That's a really good question. I don't know how to answer it. I like so many different things. I thought you were going in a different direction with that question.
Yeah, you flipped it.
Yeah. James?
Well, funny thing is, actually, a lot of the, I remember like specifically looking at some art, like at Beale Times or even before, and being like, this guy, I hate his work, you know, or this, I don't like her stuff at all. This song sucks. And then all of a sudden,
Remember who it was?
oh yeah,
Or do
but
you not
I'm not
wanna
even gonna
say?
get into it
Oh,
because
okay.
now I'm like, actually, I totally love this work. You know, that happens to me. I have this, and that was at a younger age, right? And then talking to some older people later on and kind of explaining that feeling, and they're like, yeah, but see, that's the feeling that you, like, that's sometimes a good thing that, like, when you look at something, you're like, I don't really like it, or it's unsettling, or it's, you know, it's, you're actually getting an emotion out of it, you're actually getting a feeling out of it. So sometimes this, and I've heard people talk about it before, and I was like, that sounds like just some made-up weird story to sound like a made-up weird kind of cool guy or something like that, but it's actually like a real thing. Like sometimes stuff you hate, or for me personally, I found this like, okay, I'm gonna just say like even like Basquiat and Rauschenberg and some other fine art stuff that I was just like, oh, that's just sloppy garbage and a mess, and they scribbled it down, and that, like, that stuff is, I love it, and I get it, and I just really, but I remember specifically saying, I hate this stuff, you know, as a kid, being like, this guy's not good, this, you know, this person's not good, and even with music, but I mean, what do I really hate? I don't know. Mean people? I don't know, mean jerks.
Mean jerks.
Yeah, mean jerks. I don't know.
Who may
It's
or
a
may
good
not
question.
do art.
Yeah, who may or may not do art, exactly, yeah.
Well, for me, it's, I remember Arlene Kennedy, used to be the director of Macintosh Gallery. She came up with a phrase, that's a common phrase, but she says, she was talking about something, and she says, well, I have Catholic tastes, so even if I don't really like it, I find a little bit of good in that. And I do the same thing. I thought that's a great phrase, because I don't think, I'm not going to go out and hate that. I might say, well, I don't really like that, but that little bit in the corner is pretty good. So I find, so I don't really, I can't really pinpoint any examples, but I'll find, I don't go saying, well, I hate that, I hate this. It's always something that maybe I don't really like it too much, but there's something really good in that corner, or that bit, what they did there is good, or that piece of writing was pretty good, but the book's this long, but I only like that little bit, but there's still that little piece in it that was good or redeeming in it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how many times have you guys walked into a museum and you like see the thing that the big opening's for, and you go, I don't know, it's all right, but then you go up and you read the didactic or whatever, and you're like, oh my god, it's awesome. And then you go look at it again, and you're like, oh great, you know, and you're like, want to buy the catalog, you know what I mean? You're like, this is so good. And I mean, to me, that's definitely a combination of curator doing their job too, and the, you know, and the writer doing their job too. But it actually brings the work to, you know, I mean, like,
Yes, go ahead, no, go ahead, I just thought of something.
well, like there was a show at Museum London just recently, the Games one, right? Where there's a few artists in there that I totally love. You know, Corey Archangel and well, Yoko Ono had a piece too, and then there was another guy from Glasgow. David Shrigley had a piece in there too.
That Shrigley
You better
guy?
watch out, man. We're coming for you.
That's not
Yeah.
Shrigley.
And they had pieces, and like when I walked in, I was like, I don't know if I love that piece. I don't know if I love that. And I was like, oh, and that's the artist's piece I really love. And then you spend a little, you know, that's the artist who I came to see. And then you spend a little more time with it, and you get into it, and it's like this kind of thing. So this idea of like dislike and hate and stuff, it's funny. It's a good question, and it's true, and it's real, and it exists. But sometimes what's that cliche, like love is hate or whatever, you know, this kind of thing, you know.
Well, I've got one. I spent a year in New York, and so during that year I went to dozens of openings. And in Spring Street, you could go to, in the springtime, you could go to like 15 openings. So some of the art was, what the hell, and some of it was stunning. Like there was one show where there's a breathing wall. It was fabulous. But I went to one show, and this artist had torn out pictures of movie stars from the 40s and crumpled tinfoil to make frames and put Mickey Mouse ears on it. And I was like, no way, no way. And the explanations and everything else, it's like, no. And so I was lucky to join this group of artists who at that time had already been meeting for 15 years for breakfast in the same restaurant. So I went and I said, what's that show about? And they were like, didn't want to criticize anything because that was the thing. And I said, it's shit. And then one of the other artists went, yeah, actually that's shit. The other stuff is okay. And the explanation didn't make any sense, you know. I was like, what the hell?
I've had
I
people
still
though.
wonder about that.
I've been in places too though. I know there is, you gotta say shit when it's shit, right? But like,
Well, that's the only time I do.
yeah, okay. I've been in like situations where like one time I was like trapped in another country with this one guy who was just going, he literally was opening up like those art, you know, like art A to Z books and being like, this guy sucks, he sucks because this, and I'm just like, you know, like you ever had someone like criticize work and you're like, I actually know it's like legitimately great work and I love this stuff, and I've like, you know, I've had that too, or I've overheard people be like, I've overheard people criticize my work, you know?
Oh, yeah.
I've had staff of museums just be ripping me up, and I'm in there installing too, and they don't know what I'm doing, and they're like, "This guy sucks. How do you know, like this kind of thing?" You know? And I've had that happen a bunch of times, and it's fine. It's just like, it's just not that I'm saying that's what's happening with your thing, but it's just funny.
Keep doing the work though.
Yeah.
Regardless of what they say.
Well, for sure. I'm like, well, who's this guy?
Well, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or like, you know, or when someone cool doesn't like your work, and then years later they're like trying to put you in a show. You know what I mean? Like, you know, you're like,
I think
Yeah.
not. And that guy with the Mickey Mouse ears, never another show in New York. Because I remember thinking, did I miss something?
You followed to make sure you.
Was I wrong?
Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
I was wondering in your comics, but in characters, if any of them are based off people you actually met in real life.
Well, the Cocktail Kids probably, but the book I'm doing, Kite Dream, it's all people that I know. Myself and everyone in there is someone I know.
Do you mind if I ask, like, when,
No, go
when's
ahead.
your when's the compilation of those pieces coming out, and how are you doing
Kite
it? And how are
Dream or
you
the Cocktail Kids?
both everything, like, and who's publishing it, and how are you making it?
I'm not publishing it, but
Okay.
I'm having it printed.
Okay, cool.
And
Self-publishing.
so, yeah, I think it's self-printing at this point. But
Cool.
after extensive research, I found a really good printer in Beijing.
Okay.
And thanks to Deanna Tamlin's help with the alphabet book,
Nice.
I'll have that shortly. But Kite Dream, I'll probably use the same printers just because they were so patient, because I didn't know what I was doing. So that's what I'm doing about that, and then I'll sell the books myself,
Mm-hmm.
door to door,
Yeah.
if need be.
Right.
We're hoping to do Maureen's launch here for the Cocktails Out.
Yeah, what was
Good.
the approximate date of that?
I don't know because I don't have an exact date of
Right,
delivery.
2016.
We're looking around the end of June, early
I'll
July.
Right.
You should do it in the
Figure
fall.
out.
Yeah, fall's a
Do it in
good
the
time
fall.
too, when people are back in
Yeah.
town.
Yeah,
and there's
I
art.
would, but I need some money before.
Right. We can do pre-sale.
Yes, actually, my friend Mark bought the first one pre-sale.
Oh.
To pick up on your question, it's a
Yeah,
really
sorry,
good one.
it was a good
I'm
question.
thinking too, Aidan, though, not necessarily the people, but even with Gourmand, there's a biographical story, and that happens a lot in your work. That there's something in your life that finds its way into the
Yeah,
work.
there's, because of the Gordman thing, those clowns that are on the wall came off of these napkins I found in some kind of used, I think like a junk shop. They were like kids' party napkins from the 1960s. So I think it was, the print thing was 1967 on the back. It was still in its original packaging.
Oh, wow.
So I just took the image and then I changed it around and used it. It's pretty well exactly as it was. But other works that I've done is a rubber boot that I found in when there's a book, shoe shop on Richmond Road at one time. And I walked by there and I said, can I photograph those rubber boots in the window? And talked to the manager, and it was kind of a bizarre thing. I had a briefcase with me at the time. And I asked to photograph rubber boots, so it was in a display. I took a chance, and the manager says, okay. And he said, well, take them out and you can put them on that ottoman thing. And so I said, okay. And I put them on the ottoman and I photographed them. And I put my camera back in my briefcase and left. And then I used these iconic rubber boots to make these paintings that were this size. And I went to the size that were 4 foot by 8 foot. And the actual rubber boot was the size of a human. It was my scale. And I used high gloss, multiple coats of high gloss to rubberize the actual image of the boot. But it's just that I grab on like that marionette clown, and it goes multiple directions. The boot goes multiple directions. The clown here. So I like to get onto an iconic image and just use it in multiple different ways. So it's kind of each little thing. It's not the same thing over and over again. It could be the same image, but it's shrunken down. It's used in a mail art project. It ends up on the wall. It ends up in a painting. It ends up being ripped and collaged into something else. It ends up in a drawing.
Becomes a
Ends up
logo.
fax art. Yeah.
Yeah, like an
Yeah.
icon.
So it just kind of takes on its life of itself, but in multiple different variations. So I always like to grab onto an image of some sort. Like
Right.
the ones I'm doing now is cabins. The idea of it's not the same
Yeah.
cabin, it's just the idea of cabins
Yeah.
and structures that you could maybe live in or not live in. I'm just doing riffs on that constantly now.
Sometimes some of your characters have reoccurring. I've noticed this just from what I've seen. There's like reoccurring how you create them or something. Like,
The
you know,
Cocktail Kids for sure.
yeah, yeah.
For sure, and maybe they're based on somebody I know, but I'm not saying who.
Fair enough. Yeah, yeah.
But, because of,
Wait till the cameras are off.
that's right. Does that answer your question?
Any other questions? Well, join me in thanking our artists for a wonderful